Welcome to Talking Down the Highway, a Beach Boys podcast presented by Strange Currencies Music. I'm Matt.
I'm Glenn.
I'm Tim.
What up?
Hey.
Hey.
Happy New Year, guys.
Yay.
Happy New Year. Yeah. This
exciting.
one's actually being recorded in the new year.
Right. The other one dropped in the new year.
Yesterday.
Yes.
That was January 5th. Today, January 6th.
Wow. We're recording this on January 6th.
Yeah.
Nothing
Has anybody been on the Twitters?
crazy is
On the
happening.
X?
I don't think.
I haven't, no.
There's an airplane that
Yeah.
lost an emergency exit door in Portland yesterday.
So I just heard that like some kid's shirt got stripped off of him.
Apparently, yeah.
From the decompression. I was trying to imagine that. Was it just like a T-shirt that just got like?
I don't know. That's the one weird
Wow,
detail that people
that
keep
is
repeating,
weird.
and I don't know anything more than that.
Apparently, a plane took off and
Yeah.
like just the side door panel just ripped off mid-flight.
Yeah, a big enough hole to like definitely pull
Could've pulled
one or
people-
more people out, but apparently no one was sitting like right there. So
Right.
lucky. It was almost a full plane too.
Right.
Anyway,
Yikes. Yeah,
no
good
one
vibes.
died.
All right.
So 2024 is off to a better start. Maybe.
I guess
Let's
more exciting.
keep it going then.
Well,
Yeah.
about as exciting.
knock on wood.
All right. Yeah. Excitement is overrated, right?
Right.
Yeah. All
Hey,
right.
hey, do we have any news? We haven't done a listeners updates.
No,
in a
well,
while.
we haven't done a listeners update because we reached 1 billion, and
Yeah,
you know,
that's true.
after that it's kind of bragging. But I did actually want to talk a little bit about the whole like listenership thing. We always sign off with reminding our listeners to like and subscribe, smash that like button and all that shit. But I was thinking like a lot of the podcasts that I listen to, when I can tell they start to wind down, I'm like, all right, I'm done. I don't need to listen to the rest of it. Like, because it's just the customer. Hey, you know, you can buy our merchandise here,
and then I'm out. Yeah, right.
So it's like I don't need to hear that really necessarily. So I figured we should start up front by just telling our audience, and we
Okay,
know that
okay.
audience is out there.
Yes,
And it's been growing, by the way.
it is. Yeah.
But like, subscribe. We know you guys are listening, and we very much appreciate it. We love our audience, but we just don't have that engagement yet. Really,
That's what we need.
And a small humble podcast of but 1 billion listeners needs a little bit more of that kind of engagement to be able to like move into that next level. In looking at some of the stuff that we're talking about this week, I'm looking at some of these videos and stuff that are out there, and they got a lot of views. And granted, they've been out there 2, 3, whatever years, and we haven't been out that long. It's like we're putting some good content together
and
here.
we're spreading the good news. We're spreading the gospel of Brian Wilson out there, and other people need to hear it. So you should get on Instagram. Go to Talking Beach Boys.
We're up to 87 million,
87
followers
million.
on
All right,
that.
there we
Yeah.
go.
We assume, right?
We
The
assume, yeah.
numbers that are there
You can't
are just
trust the
rounded to
internet.
the nearest
That's right.
million,
That's
which
right.
is
Yeah.
where we've arrived at 1 billion listeners.
Right.
It told us we had 1,000.
Which
When it was
clearly-
900 and something, we were like, okay, 900 million.
Yeah,
So,
right. You
yeah,
got to
most
factor
likely.
out the bots.
yeah.
and-
Well, you
gotta do some
the
math.
bots are people too. Glenn.
yeah. You gotta do math. Right. That's it.
So anyway, we love our audience. We appreciate that you're listening, but those little acts of engagement really do help
So here's-
with the algorithm and pushing us a little bit higher when people are doing searches. Strange Currencies Music, the website, it's kicking some ass right
Is it?
now.
Awesome.
Our Beach Boys catalog crawl has now become already our most viewed article ever, and it's just kicking ass and taking names right now, which is great because if you do certain search things, like we're almost the first thing that shows up now.
Nice,
When you talk about like
nice.
Beach Boys albums ranked or whatever,
Well,
we're
we
even
are-
ahead of YouTube videos that have way more views than we have reads.
There
It's
we
like,
go.
all right, that's good. It's good content. It's a great article.
There is some good stuff out there. We've even done like a wilderness. I think we might.
We did
might
two
talk about.
wilder.
That's right.
Are they
Beach Boys,
wildernized?
Wildernized?
Yeah, if they're pluralized.
Wildernay.
Definitely, there are Sasquatches amongst the wilderness.
Yeah, maybe we need to remember to push that a little bit too. That we have those two in the wilderness.
Yeah, we'll probably
Articles.
touch on those a little
Yeah.
bit. So for
Yeah.
those of you who don't know, yes, this is a Beach Boys podcast, but we also engage on a larger, kind of a pop culture ring of as it relates to the music with Strange Currencies.
Yeah, I think that
Music.com.
in the wilderness stuff, I think was where I realized that I was just assuming that Al sang all the high parts.
Ah!
And then I'm like, wait a minute.
Wait a second.
You've come a long
We've
way
grown.
in your
We've
Beach Boys
grown.
knowledge since
Yeah.
then.
Yeah, okay.
And we're actually going to come and talk back about that, not in this episode, but in the next one.
okay.
I'm going to revisit some conversation that happened on those
Yeah. There might be some.
Uh-oh.
There might,
But hey, we let's take a quick break here, and we're going to come back and talk about the thing that we're talking about this week. And we're back.
Hi.
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 I'm happy.
We just finished our 2-episode arc on Pet Sounds, and so
Right.
what comes next? Well, I've already written, maybe the greatest album of all time, and now I'm going to make a teenage symphony to God.
Just a
What?
quick aside.
What
Let's-
is that?
now that we've said that phrase, can we now never say it again?
Yeah.
Every time SMiLE comes up, that's someone's got to say, "You need to free to God." Sorry, I just
Now, was that part of the Derek Taylor marketing thing, or is that
I don't
something
know.
Brian
I
actually
think-
was saying to people?
I'm not really sure. I mean, in that TV movie, it was shown as Brian saying it.
Yeah.
I don't know. In the documentary, Beautiful Dreamer, I forget what the person who says it, who they attribute it to, but it always pops up, and I'm
It does.
kind of sick of it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But the premise is there.
Yes.
And I like it because it reminds us where maybe Brian's head's at. We've been talking through Pet Sounds, and this was like this catastrophic breaking open of like a new kind of way that Brian's now looking at music. And so what is next? And it's almost like, there was this, we'll talk more about this competition he has in his mind with Phil Spector, with the Beatles.
Right.
And I almost get a sense that Pet Sounds dropped. It's blown away anything that the Beatles done. Part of me kind of wants to think of that whole Teenage Symphony to God as that
We're
like
gonna have to do a
like a word of the day.
Oh.
Pee-wee. Yeah.
anyway,
That he's not competing with the Beatles anymore. He's communicating on a higher level.
yeah, that makes sense.
And I kind of like that. I
Sure.
like that.
Although
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
still very,
He
very
is.
much.
He's
competing
very
with
much.
the Beatles.
Yeah.
I will say
He's at least like blown Spector's ass out of the water
Yeah.
now, but he's like still definitely focused on
I will say
competing
that
with the Beatles.
Derek Taylor did come up with Pocket Symphony for Good
Okay.
Vibrations. Yeah.
All right. Well, and we haven't even said the name of the project yet. So we are
I said
talking,
it.
of course, about the SMiLE project now. But yeah, you just mentioned the other name, and before we get to SMiLE, we have to really kind of start talking about what is the follow-up single to Pet Sounds, and that is, of course, Good Vibrations.
Right.
So, Pet Sounds drops in May of 1966. By that point, Brian had already been pretty heavily engaged in working on Good Vibrations. In fact, he had pretty much started working on the song during the Pet Sounds sessions.
did.
And he's like, all right, this thing's going to be involved. It's going to be really complex. I'm going to put that aside while I finish Pet Sounds. Now that Pet Sounds is out and that it's out of his hands, he's turning his attention back now to Good Vibrations.
Right.
Which does feel kind of like the next step in his development. Because if we're going to break down Good Vibrations here, but he started to now, I mean, I guess there were like symphonic elements
Right.
in Pet Sounds, but now like Good Vibrations now dials it up even another level. And at this point, he's now maybe he's earned this leeway with Capitol Records because he's delivered Pet Sounds.
Artistically,
Yeah,
yes. Commercially, maybe
financially.
not as much because
Right.
Capitol doesn't care about the reviews as much as it cares about the sales numbers.
Yeah.
But that's the thing about Good Vibrations. It's like, I mean, in hindsight, we know he spent
That's
so
the one.
much on studio time because
he
he's
did,
in.
It was so successful. That's the one that got him carte blanche for SMiLE.
Right, but even at the time, he spent so much on Good Vibrations. Like,
Oh, it was the most expensive single
Right.
ever recorded.
and so
I think I have
he's
that
in
number.
what 5 different studios recording
4 or
bits,
5, I think it
Yeah.
was. Yeah.
bits and pieces of this.
It costs somewhere in the tens of thousands. There's all kinds of varying rumors. There was one source that said just the electrotheremin was $15,000.
I saw that. Yeah.
Who knows?
Well, so one thing that we need to add for context here, like why is a song being recorded in 4 different studios? Well, because Brian is now engaged in a very, very different kind of composing and recording that he is going to refer to as modular recording.
Mm-hmm.
The idea that he was going to put into effect here with Good Vibrations is you write pieces, what he calls feels, and you record those things as their own little pieces, 20, 30 seconds or whatever, and then you find a way to just sort of assemble them all together. And so, yeah, he is, working in a very different way than I'm going to have a group of 20 musicians out there that I'm directing, and I'm going to, record all of the instruments at once, and we're going to do all that, and then I'll bring the boys in to sing over it. He's now saying, no, I'm going to record this little fragment here with this group of people. I'm going to record a different fragment here with this group of people. And then eventually we'll find just the way of how do we stitch it all together.
Which is bananas.
It is.
Because that's
And
kind
Louis,
of
too.
That's kind of how touche. Banana and Louis being the names of
Brian's dogs.
Yeah. But it's wild because here, this is how music is kind of made now. Like with computers and multi-tracking, like in many ways, he's doing like a super modern way of production, but in like way ahead of its time. Because like that kind of talking about, okay, I got this little kind of section here, this little segment here. Like DJs, that's what Pro Tools is kind of made for. You can kind of like, shift segments around and pop them. Whereas they're doing this with tape.
Right.
And so he's got like reels and reels of this, of these little slices and he's
Literally splicing the tape.
splicing tape and putting them together. And you can hear it on the final cut. Like that's one of my favorite things.
You can hear the edits.
Very hard transitions.
Which that's one of my favorite things to do with people if I can get them to allow me to like geek out a little bit. And so like I sat my brother down and I'm like, dude, let me show you something. And like they all know Good Vibrations because it's a pop song. Like we've all heard it on the radio. But like I'm like, listen. He's in whatever Sun Studio or what are the
Western and Gold Star.
He was in
Western, 2 big ones.
Western here, and then listen because he's gonna cut in a session from Gold Star, and we're listening. It's like boom, you can hear it, and it's like, dude, I never noticed that before.
Yeah,
and so like the song, Good Vibrations, start to finish, has like a piece from like 5 different studios, and you can totally hear them.
And it's still under 4 minutes long. It's incredible.
And it's totally catchy and totally like accessible.
Yeah.
It's a pop masterpiece.
And weirdly, they were still worried that it was too long.
Right.
Like 3.5 minutes or whatever. Because that was kind of long.
I guess so for them, yeah.
For 1966. But
well, it still fits on a 7-inch, right? Or
totally. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. This song is definitely fucking with the formula.
Ooh,
it's destroying the formula.
Yeah, totally.
And yet it's a massive, massive smash. The biggest hit of their career. It's their third song to go to number 1.
Yeah.
Their first million-selling single.
Well, you know why? It's because Mike Love wrote it.
Well, yeah, that's obviously.
That's why it went big.
I do have some minutia and some trivia about all this. So we talk about him using all these studios. And, well, first of all, this recording process started during the Pet Sound sessions, like you were saying, but it just resulted in that, what I played you guys off mic, which is this early version of Good Vibrations that just kind of jumps right into the chorus, and it's missing a lot of those individual like sections. It's not very good. So he shelves that. Like the boys wanted it to be on Pet Sounds. Like this could be really good on this album, and he said no. And that's when they put that out, and then he started to focus on doing it in the modular way. The first round of lyrics were co-written by Tony Asher, but they were scrapped.
Yeah.
But Asher...
He ended up using those lyrics later for the solo Brian Wilson Presents SMiLE.
Oh, okay. I didn't even notice that.
Yeah.
But Asher was the one that told him to name it Good Vibrations instead of Good Vibes because he thought that was too, what did he say, too trendy.
Can I interject a little bit of Mike Love trivia then, Tier? To that? Well, I somehow while grieving my father's death, I double
That got dark.
I double down on the darkness and
right.
read Mike Love's autobiography. Right. So I'm like crying tears. Anyways, so Mike Love claims that Brian had written it, Good Vibrations, and kind of given him a cut of it, and he was supposed to write the lyrics. And so he went and he like flaked. He forgot to do it. And he was
That's why I wrote him in the car.
and he was driving to the studio. Crap, we got to record vocals today. And he wrote him. And he's like, "What rhymes with vibrations?"
Excitations.
Excitations. Freaking so many better words he could have come up with.
Implications.
I mean, hesitations. Like, oh my gosh.
Well, yeah. But
And so my argument is, yes, Mike Love has a writing credit on Good Vibrations.
Well, by all accounts, he did come up with a do, because the version you just heard, it skips all that. It's in the background, but it doesn't include it.
Fine, but then he just made it silly with this nonsensical word that's...
Look,
you know what? It's okay. It's so catchy. It doesn't matter.
We're going to lose some listeners if we don't at least acknowledge when occasionally Mike Love does something positive.
Yeah.
And he's credited with that hook, and it's a fucking great hook. Okay. I mean, let's be honest. He even a stopped clock is right twice a day, right? So
2-3 times a day, yeah. According to Gary Busey. So at one
good
point,
job, Mike.
Funny thing is that after those lyrics were established, Brian offered Van Dyke Parks the chance to rewrite them, but he said no because he didn't want to alienate Mike Love, which of course.
Interesting.
What else?
Foreshadowing?
There is
foreshadowing.
How'd that turn out?
But there's a line in there. She goes with me to a blossom world. It feels oddly cut off, and it's not a rhyme with the previous line. That's because it was supposed to include "we find" blossom world we find, but Brian decided not to include it. Let's see.
I think part of it was, they would have probably assembled all of the pieces by the time they recorded the vocals. So yeah, I was going to say that might have been part of the reason, but yeah.
Yeah, allegedly he wanted to just highlight the bass line going into the chorus more. I don't know. Another fun fact, Dennis was supposed to sing lead, but he had laryngitis that day, so Carl stepped in at the last minute. Carl sings it. There's a quote from the wiki I got to read. In early September, the master tapes for Good Vibrations were stolen. Mysteriously, they reappeared inside Brian's home 2 days later.
What?
I don't know. The primary source for that, the link was like paywall, so I have no idea.
Al, what happened?
Right.
Yeah. Hey, Al. Yeah, that's right. You can call me Al.
Yeah, call us. We want to know what happened.
Yeah.
Somebody knows something about that.
I'll bet it was Mike Love.
Mike did it.
I mean,
Al talked him down he's like, no.
I mean, this is written like
Mike with the formula
really
way too much.
No, Mike. Yeah. Al talked him down. He's like, give it back.
I don't know. This is written like Brian did it, but it doesn't explain why. It's just like maybe he took him home to protect them.
To add some more mystique.
Hey, more foreshadowing. There's a lot of paranoia as we
that's
enter
true.
this
That's
era.
true.
So.
By the way, go online to I think it's called YouTube.
Oh, okay. What is
this new?
And search Good Vibrations Ed Sullivan Show. Because it's a really cool video. It's like, first of all, they're all wearing these like white suits, and Carl he's like the front man. He's doing great. He's got the sideburns. And yeah, you do see Mike Love there, and he's playing something that's. You guys want to talk about the electrotheremin? We kind of beat it to death a little bit last time.
Yeah, no, let's do it.
Okay, just more fun facts. These are the things I like. So, first of all, last time I said Wikipedia made it sound like there was literally only one electrotheremin, and Paul Tanner always played it. Couldn't find confirmation of that. But this guy, David S. Miller, who is the co-creator of the Tannerin, which was built sort of in tribute to Paul Tanner and like a little bit smaller and easier to handle, he says there were two versions of the electrotheremin made. One of them, the early one, had like an arc sort of motion you had to use, and then the other one was just the slide, the straight linear thing. And it was actually built by a guy named Bob Witzel, but Paul Tanner and him developed it together. And it was I think it was Tanner's idea. He was a trombone player for Glenn Miller.
But like that's the
right.
So and I think Mike Love does play that.
Well, he does. So that's the other fun fact I got from the same guy, Miller. The thing he was playing live, and you'll see this in the Ed Sullivan video, it's just like a strip, like a magnetic strip that he has his finger going up and down on. That was called a Moog ribbon controller.
Oh, okay.
And it was built specifically for them so they could play this song live.
Interesting.
So he is playing that, but it's not the same instrument. It's like a variation on it. Yeah.
So you start to see where all that budget is going.
Oh, and
We're like building new instruments here.
Right.
Like this is next level stuff. We're like changing the way recording's done and changing the way writing is done.
Yeah.
Like, come on.
And I'll say Mike in the Ed Sullivan performance, he had a strategy with his hair. He's not wearing a hat. His hair's long, but it's definitely like a comb over kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, but it works. Like on first glance, you're like, this is not a bald man. But we all know the truth.
Yeah. We know what you're hiding, Mike.
We know what's up.
Okay.
So
That's it.
So Good Vibrations here. Smash hit.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Comes out in October.
There were a lot of people smashing the like button on that one.
There were. And so now we're like stratosphere now. Now this is like, okay, we can see glimpses of what if we let Brian do his thing. So now he's got carte blanche. Yeah. And now Brian is the wonderkin, is the whole genius. Brian's a genius. Is that around this time?
Well, that was coming around with Pet Sounds.
Yeah.
Really.
Right. And so like even that now is catapulted. And so now it's like, okay, what would happen if we just let Brian go?
The boys go on tour. Brian's
So that's where we are contextually as we enter what we're calling the SMiLE project.
Right.
We're like, okay, Brian, go do more of this. Go let's put something together. Take Good Vibrations and let's take this new modular thing that you're doing and go for it.
It kind of he meets Van Dyke Parks at a Terry Melcher party. And I don't think any writing had even started before that point. This is July of '66, and then they get together and start like coming up with ideas and stuff.
Yeah, and they are kind of operating on this idea that they're going to take the Brian's modular approach and now expand that out to a whole LP. We're going to make an entire record that is composed of these feels, these little short pieces, and just kind of make this.
It was
that
like
what shall not be said by piecing together fragments, and it's a brilliant idea.
Now, where are the Beatles at this time?
Well, I was going to say this is a response to the British invasion. Like, there's quotes from Van Dyke Park saying, like, American bands are singing in like fake British accents and this and that, and we wanted to make something that was explicitly American,
right?
With sort of like Americana themes.
Yeah, which is kind of like the Rhapsody in Blue.
Rhapsody in Blue,
right?
Big
it's
influence,
kind of that influential. That's very American.
Yeah,
and so that was kind of maybe the symphonic undertones of it. But
to get to your question about where were the Beatles, so this is summer of '66 when when they're putting the finishing touches on Good Vibrations and he meets Van Dyke Parks. Revolver was released, I think, in August, I want to say, of '66. So that's where they are. They're in their last phase of touring. This is their last American tour, which after that they just stopped being a touring group. So they're doing their own, sort of retreat as studio artists as well. And you've got to figure that Brian was aware of that happening, even though the Beatles were a little bit hush-hush about it for a while, that they are kind of taking a page out of the Brian Wilson textbook, except for they're doing it as a whole band.
Right.
They're like, we're done touring. We're going to, become studio artists now. And so now we've got this production race, this arms race between
it's a race.
The two biggest pop luminaries, like Brian Wilson and the Beatles.
Yeah, and the first band to put out the new sound, quote unquote, was going to be the winner, essentially.
Effectively, and we could argue that Brian had kind of done that on a single level. Yeah, in putting out Good Vibrations, but now he says, "I'm going to do this across a whole album." Yeah, we're into the album era,
and he and Mike
the
both
album
claim...
era. Well, real quick, to just sort of a point of context. Between the Beatles and the Beach Boys, we are in an album era now, where people care much, much more about an album because, as Brian himself said, Rubber Soul was like the first album that, great front to back. Then Pet Sounds, now Revolver, and the single has sort of been supplanted as, so the single is the thing that gets people in the door. It's the thing that gets on the radio, of course, but the artistic statement really
is the album
now.
Right. But so just as far as the Beatles, Mike and Brian both claim that Revolver wasn't really a factor. Like obviously Rubber Soul, but I think the Revolver period, according to Mike, he says Brian was in his own world. I think at that point he was just kind of in his bubble.
Right.
Where it wasn't until Strawberry Fields comes out that he really is like, oh shit, well they kind of beat me to it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, we'll get there.
And I think that speaks to that my mindset that I have that like Brian's almost on another level. Yes.
Yeah.
yes, Rubber Soul pushed him to try and respond with Pet Sounds, but now that he's done Pet Sounds, it's like he's like, okay, what's next? I've done it.
And he says this isn't even pop music anymore at this point. Yeah.
Right. And so he's now even stratosphered, you know, he's talking a spiritual album, and you know, there's also nods that we'll talk of a humor album, or like a health food album.
Yeah.
And maybe we're gonna do an album of what were the other on conservation,
the elements and stuff.
Yeah, the elements.
Did we go into SMiLE without taking a break?
Well, let's take a quick break here. Yeah,
So
I've
wait a
been
minute.
pointing at my wrist, and I don't know if either of you saw me.
I don't
here.
pay attention to what
So
you say.
yeah,
or do.
we've talked a lot about good vibrations and sort of that context. So let's take a quick break. We'll come back and we're going to talk about SMiLE, or as it's known, a blank to blank. So we'll be right back.
That's right.
Yeah. All right, here we are. We're talking about the SMiLE project, the blank to blank.
Yeah.
A blank.
Yep.
And so it's time. I feel like a good way to do this is to round up the usual suspects. I think we should talk, because really this is a personnel conversation. I think because now we know what Brian's capable of. The rest of the boys go off to tour, and so now Brian's surrounding himself with Wrecking Crew.
Not really called that, but yeah.
Not really called
Not
that.
yet.
Those folks are around.
But it wasn't just the session musicians. Really, in his personal time, he had all these other people around.
And that's what it really is. Is really all of a sudden Brian's like, okay, I'm gonna expand my mind here, and I'm gonna go bigger. And so he goes and he buys up like what?
I have
How much pot does he buy? You have this?
He buys $2,000 worth of hash and pot, which is equivalent to $18,000 in today's money.
$18,000 worth of pot. Oh my gosh!
And the tent.
Oh,
essentially.
Well, let's establish first off, like,
Yes.
it's not just for Brian.
Right.
He's got a fucking entourage.
yeah, and that's my
right?
point. Right, he's got the entourage. Yeah. Well, and you spend $18,000 worth of pot. And you're like what, 22 years old?
He's probably 24.
24?
I think now.
Yeah.
But like, oh my gosh, that dude is a king right now, and he's in Bel Air or whatever. I don't know.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay, but he's in the hills of LA.
He's still in Beverly Hills.
He's in Beverly Hills. Excuse me, in Beverly Hills, in his early 20s, with $18,000 worth of pot
and a fucking entourage.
You've got yourself an entourage.
And so, one of the guys around him is David Anderley. He was like a talent scout or something like that, but he became like kind of an enabler, but not all in bad ways, I would say. But yeah, according to him, like everyone like getting this tent, it's basically for hotboxing, was like something everyone was into, and they thought this might help them creatively.
Right.
Now, hold on a minute. In the documentary Beautiful Dreamer, they ask Brian what he did in the tent, and he says they mostly just ate sandwiches.
Yeah, that's true.
Diplomatic response.
We gotta go with him.
That's good.
That's primary source.
Yeah, that's right.
But the tent cost $30,000.
Well, that's like a fucking like nice Arabian.
Yeah, and which is the equivalent of
amazing.
$271,000 in today's money.
Wow, $250,000.
He replaced all the furniture
That's
in
affordable
the
housing.
room. Yeah, he replaced all the furniture with gym mats. So he was like, trying to get into this whole exercising thing, but also like an opium den.
Yeah.
So those pictures of the Beach Boys where they're like stacked on top of each other with a dog and everything, that's in the tent, right?
I think so.
Okay, yeah.
So he's got this opium den. I love that.
And this is all in preparation for writing.
And you know what's missing is the beach. So
that's right.
Isn't this the same time?
It's the same time period.
The sandbox is now built.
They put the piano in the sandbox, which sounds like a great idea, honestly.
Brilliant.
Like putting your feet in that, it's great. I love it. Apparently his dog's shitting it though.
The dog's like it. Was it Owl? Didn't Al say he wouldn't go near
Did
the
Al
thing?
shit in the? Is that what you're suggesting?
Maybe
so.
Al.
Whoa, hey. Al.
Let us know. Let us know what was really going down in the sandbox.
Yikes.
Yeesh.
Okay. Well, so he's working at home.
Yeah.
By and large.
So
now the recording isn't going to happen there.
No, but he's
not
he's
initially.
conceiving.
Oh, no, you're right. Not at all.
He's composing. He's conceiving. He's getting these ideas. They're all floating around.
The working title is Dumb Angel, by the
Dumb
way.
Angel.
And he's got all these people. So you mentioned David Anderley. We talked earlier about Van Dyke Parks as part of the entourage.
Yeah.
Van Dyke, if I don't know that we've expressed this already, he's there to write lyrics.
He is a writer.
Brian is essentially almost entirely just saying, Van Dyke, you're doing the lyrics.
Yeah.
It's even
Less of a
more
collaboration.
So. Yeah, even
Right.
more so than it had been with
Asher.
Pet Sounds with Tony Asher, right?
Yeah.
Who else is in the entourage?
Many.
There's all kinds of different, in the documentary we've been speaking of, Beautiful Dreamer, which you can find on, I think, do they call it YouTube? Yeah.
I think so.
Highly recommended. I think if you're gonna watch one Beach Boys related film, I
SMiLE
highly
related. Yeah. Like
Right.
It's really all about, but it's a great resource for that because it was directed by David Leaf, who was like one of their biographers. He wrote a book about SMiLE. There's firsthand interviews with Brian
Right.
and a lot of those people. Anderley's on there. There are some people who I don't think necessarily were there, but still were like kind of part of that scene.
But the story arc is great,
Yeah.
and lots of good information, and kind of gives you a window into what was going on.
Yeah.
It's weird, like seeing those people being interviewed as like normal, healthy, functional adults and everything, because the way in which they're depicted in the not best Beach Boys movie, An American Family, a John Stamos joint.
Yeah.
They're like depicted. You know that when in Breaking Bad, when Jesse has that like weeks long house party where there's just all the degenerates laying around on
Totally.
they basically portray it as like that's what's going on in Brian Wilson's house, and that's not what's fucking going on in Brian Wilson's house, right? I mean, these guys are
I'm sure there were some people like that, but he was also surrounded by a lot of creative people. And they were encouraging him to go to these different, creative places.
Yeah. And he is. He's going to some really, really amazing creative places.
Well, and that's kind of the other thing is that maybe there was, and that's maybe where the narratives diverge, is there's this one school of thought that, these drugs are what caused all of this, and
they're not laying around with
downhill.
needles sticking out of their arms. They're smoking pot.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Well, but again, there's this one school of thought that like that's this evil thing that's what's corrupting him.
John fucking Stamos.
Well, but then there's the other
supported by Nancy Reagan.
there's this other thought that like this is Brian like finding the tools that are with him to like we talk about the ego. It's this idea that what would happen if I got rid of all of the distractions and I could almost kind of like get outside of the trappings and really tap into what's really important. Get rid of the girls and the root beer and the county fair and like talk about actual human emotions.
Root beer was the real problem.
I'm just and sometimes maybe that was something that marijuana was good for, helping you kind of like get rid of those distractions.
So in regards to the drugs, at some point, I don't know what the primary source was, but there's a small quote from Brian where he says that LSD wasn't really an issue. Like he did the one time, maybe he did more, but like that wasn't really going on there. It was marijuana. It's like he clarified it wasn't LSD, it was pot.
Yeah.
But he's spoken highly about what that had done to his creativity, smoking pot. But he was on this other drug called desbutal, which was it was used as an antidepressant in those days, but it was basically meth and barbiturates mixed together, which can cause like amphetamine psychosis and like paranoia and shit like that. So his brain was pretty fried with that.
So that's the
downfall.
That's the other problem that we have in the midst of this is that Brian's got some serious mental health issues
and
that are going on.
Really aggravated.
And when you have this kind of explorative culture with just like pot running free and barbiturates and whatever else.
Basically a meth head there for a while.
Maybe opium. I don't know.
Probably not, but but I say opium den because that's what the tent was. But
beautiful.
anyway,
so they get to work though, right? And they're in the house. They're in the sandbox specifically, and Brian and Van Dyke spend a lot of time in the sandbox, and they start writing these songs, and they're fucking glorious. Seriously. Like in that documentary, they asked Brian, like, what songs did you write in the Sandbox? He's like, Heroes and Villains and Wonderful and Surf's Up. It's like, good God.
Jeez.
Like, we are talking some of the finest pop music ever written.
Right.
I mean, Surf's Up. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah, it's great.
What an absolutely glorious piece of songwriting.
What the hell does this lyric mean?
Well, and we're gonna get into that. We're after a break. Right now we're talking about the positives here.
Right.
This creative atmosphere that Brian and his entourage have created, that Van Dyke is such a critical part of as well too, and they are making capital A art.
Yeah.
Right. This is not the fucking Jesse
Little Deuce
Pinkman.
Right.
Crack house that it's portrayed as. This is a creative atmosphere in which they are making fucking magic.
And they're encouraging, they're like all of these people. Now he's being surrounded with people who are like, yeah, no, don't make this because it'll make money. Make it because it's valuable and it's interesting and it's heartfelt and it's meaningful. Whereas before he's surrounded, he's got Murray and Mike Love yelling at him to write more about cars and engines because that's what'll sell.
Well, here's such a difference. A and B this. In 63 to 65 or whatever, he's coming up with ideas and he's getting pushback from his bandmates because no, this is you're fucking with the formula, all that. Now here he is, he's bringing stuff to these friends and they're like, this is amazing.
Right.
Like, this is great.
Exactly.
But then he's saying,
positive
yeah,
feedback.
it is, but I can do it even better.
Right.
Like they talk about in the documentary how he'll bring sort of like a finished idea for a song and they're like, Brian, this is fucking awesome. This is amazing. But then he's like, yeah, well, thanks for the support, but now I'm going to, you're pushing me to go edit it and revise it and put this here and move this thing here. And then he brings it back to him. They're like, oh, holy shit. What?
Right.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's very sensitive to feedback.
Right.
Positive and negative.
And he's getting that positive feedback. And what he is creating here is just glorious.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not talking about this in the way that we do, like we're going to go through an album, because if you're listening to this, you know what happens. But let's talk about a couple of these songs here.
Sure.
I mean, Surf's Up. I got to talk about this. Melodically, holy shit.
Yeah.
Like that, the columnated ruins domino, just that melodic phrase is
vocal.
breathtaking. Like, it is amazing.
That insane falsetto that he does there too, which I don't think he quite pulls off in the 2004. I think some other voice comes in. Yeah.
But Van Dyke's lyrics to that song,
So good.
So good. That is maybe the most poetic pop music written, period. Maybe even beyond Bob Dylan. Like, it is so dense.
Yeah.
It is so... The imagery is so vivid. I cannot tell you what a single line of it means, and yet you walk away from it knowing exactly what the mood, what the song, what it is trying to convey.
Right.
And it is just so beautiful.
Right.
Can we talk a little bit about that Leonard Bernstein
show?
Go
ahead.
Because this is something that happened during the process of recording SMiLE when it was still maybe going to come out. Leonard Bernstein hosts this kind of documentary sort of show on CBS where he devotes a whole section to Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys, I guess, but Brian Wilson primarily, and talks about how some of this modern day pop, and this is a classical, conductor. Apparently, there's a movie out about it right now that looks a little wacky, but he talking about how modern pop music at that time was, some of it's actual poetry and some of it's really culturally important. He does say something about most of it's crap, most of it's garbage, but the 5% that's good, needs to be paid attention to. So he's bringing this to a very, very mainstream audience, very square moms and dads or whatever, their living rooms. And specifically, the documentary shows a lot of this, just unaltered. And in the background the whole time is Brian playing Surf's Up on the piano, and then it keeps cutting to him singing it, just to illustrate what Bernstein's talking about. And all of that stuff is... Everything you said is basically what he was saying about it, and then you see Brian performing it, and you hear those lyrics, and
you don't even need all the arrangement and the production. I mean, those things make it even better, but just on its own, it's just a piece of writing.
Yeah, it's just a great showcase of that.
Yeah.
good stuff.
All right. I've got another question for you, gentlemen.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me the name of your favorite vegetable.
Oh, hey, I will say we were walking in here and Tim had a song stuck in his. You had little pads stuck in your head.
Yeah.
I've had vegetables stuck in my head for
there you go.
the entire week. Like everywhere I go, I've been singing favorite vegetables.
I love it.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
I so love that song.
So wacky. Like there's a lot of like just fun. Now here's the other funny thing about vegetables. Is this like, can we map the progression of Brian Wilson's writing to his physical health? Because like, is he eating cheeseburgers at this point?
Yeah, there's a point in the I think in the documentary where he says like he got into this whole health kick about like, you know, eat a lot, or what is it, like run a lot, do a lot, never be lazy.
Never be lazy.
Eat a lot, sleep a lot, brush them like crazy.
But then
And he's got
at some point he's like, but I was too lazy to do any of that stuff, so I wanted other people to do it, but then I was just kind of like.
But isn't he like 300 plus pounds at this point?
No, I think he's not that big.
No. Maybe that's later.
Yeah, no, he got big in the 70s.
That's like the bedridden.
Yeah. No,
So
he's
He's getting chubby.
He's a little chubby, but he's doing fine.
But he's not like living a healthy lifestyle.
But he's got gym mats in the instead of furniture.
I think it's more.
He's got
inspiration.
serious munchies because he's eaten. I mean, he's just been eating a lot of sandwiches.
A lot of sandwiches.
Yeah.
Right.
What else are you gonna do in that tent, right?
He's pretty funny in that documentary.
Is vegetables the impetus for the radiant radish?
I don't know.
When is
Probably.
that?
We'll talk about that in time.
The same kind of stuff. Yeah.
But I love that song.
Yeah.
It's so warm and awesome. Honestly, though, probably this might be sacrilege, but I think my favorite version of Vegetables is probably the solo one on the 2004 recording. It's just got great forward propulsive momentum.
Okay, but I have a problem here. Because we're talking about some of these tracks on an album that hasn't even come out.
I know. But let's keep talking about some of these songs here.
Okay.
They're in the glory days. This collaboration that Van Dyke Parks in this documentary I think refers to like quite literally as heaven. And what else are they writing? I don't know. Wonderful.
Yeah.
Jeez, what a great song.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Oh, I guess for my dad's sake, I want to interject and just clarify that the documentary's title is Beautiful Dreamer, and it's available on YouTube.
Yeah,
there it is.
It is.
Watch it.
But yeah, wonderful.
So beautiful.
It's so good. And I know we're talking about recordings that aren't out yet, but like this is one that, I don't know, that's full glory. I don't think was really realized until the Brian version started to come out. Absolutely. Obviously the Carl version is good too, but like there's a lot more going on in the Brian, like the harpsichord version.
Yeah.
But anyway,
it's so great. Let's see, another couple. I mean, wind chimes.
Well, yeah, wind chimes.
Wind chimes is great. I heard you start to say we're going to get to that one in a minute because that's a critical key moment. Right. One thing to that I think is really sort of interesting about talking about the SMiLE project. There's sort of varying arguments on whether or not Brian intended Good Vibrations to be a part of it. Yeah. And I believe really sort of what is seen as canon is that Brian did not want Good Vibrations to be part of SMiLE.
It always feels kind of tacked on. It doesn't really fit with the themes or even the, I don't know, compositional style.
Mike Love got his mitts on it, that's why.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
I think that we're going to, because I want to say that when they put together the album cover.
Right. It says Good Vibrations.
It says Good Vibrations all over it, right? Oh, wait a minute. Sounds like it's time for an episode of Sound and Vision.
Oh, boy.
All right, it's time for Sound and Vision, where we discuss all things aesthetic using the scale provided to us by David Bowie. Glenn, if we really like something, we call it a...
Low.
That's right, David Bowie's masterpiece. If we really don't like something, Tim, we call it a...
Never Let Me Down.
In which David Bowie definitely.
Yeah, fuck you, David Bowie.
Hey.
Sorry. Just for that one album. Yeah.
Hey.
Hey, guys.
Hey,
Let's
and
dance.
if it's in the middle, we've got a comfortable middle ground.
Let's dance.
Let's dance. Dave Bowie's I can't talk.
Okayest.
David Bowie's okayest album.
Okayest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
So, all right. So SMiLE.
Frank Holmes.
Frank Holmes. Tell me about Frank Holmes.
I don't know anything about Frank Holmes.
I mean, I
really,
forget
but
whose friend he was, but he was, someone in the circle.
part of the entourage.
Right, and the album cover came together before the album really did, and apparently it was a source of inspiration for the album.
Yeah.
Because, just the idea of SMiLE and then all the smiles and, the sort of bright, happy sort of vibe of it, I think, sort of fed into the whole overall thing. I think it was actually, well, no, that's not true. It was the title SMiLE was before the cover, obviously.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love it because it looks like it was done in marker. You know what I mean? You can see all those line, like the green inside the windows.
There's a naivete to it. There's this kind of childlike quality.
Right. And it looks like those kind of markers you'd get as a kid in elementary school. You know?
Can you sniff this album cover?
I'm sure the original, yeah.
All right, nice.
But yeah, this
it's just like a picture of a little storefront, and it's done in markers. It's kind of this Americana type.
Oh yeah.
Is it suggesting that you can buy happiness?
Ooh. But it's referred to as the SMiLE Shop.
The SMiLE Shop.
This is the lowest of the low for me as far as rating it. I like this cover a lot.
I like it too.
Yeah.
I like it.
Definitely low.
A lot of the other ones that, and a lot of the other good album covers, the context sort of plays into them, like Pet Sounds, because it's such an the kind of cover you wouldn't expect to go on some big, super duper album. But this is out of context is cool.
Mm-hmm. It's literally a piece of art.
Yeah.
It's literally a piece of art that says something, and it's communicating something that connects and that I think furthers the music. I think it supports it, and it continues to comment on it. There is that element of it that it's intentionally kind of has that childlike quality to it. It's
it's a cartoon.
Sure, of course you can buy happiness. You can buy a SMiLE. Look, and it's the 50s. Yeah, just walk into walk into this storefront shop.
There's a little bit of a retro.
It does kind of have a bit of a square vibe to it. Lots of the shape. Yeah,
it's great.
It is low. It's low.
I'm totally okay with a low on this one. Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right, good episode.
Yay.
Hey, let's take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk a little bit about the recording now as we go from writing to putting this stuff on tape. So we'll be right back.
Hi, everybody. We're back on Talking Down the Highway. We're talking about the SMiLE project. And I guess the recording process now. I mean, we've talked about some of the songs already. Do we want to kind of finish that off or just go into...
Well, I think you said SMiLE project.
Right.
We're intentionally not talking about SMiLE sessions.
No.
Because,
we'll get there
because
someday.
that'll come down the road when all of these recordings become publicly accessible. They actually release all of these session recordings. But at this point, it's just a project. It's an album that's supposed to come out here. And we talked about how it's getting composed, it's getting written. Brian is high as a kite, and probably everyone else as well in the circle. And there's a lot of positive energy going on, lots of good vibes, lots of feeling out, okay, I'm liking this.
Hold on. Tony Asher would like you to go back and rephrase that.
Lots of good vibrations.
There we go. Okay.
Lots of good vibrations happening. Positive energy. He's getting positive feedback. We're soaring. Everything's good.
Let's go into the studio now.
Let's now go into the studio and let's This
no. We're still happy.
We're still happy?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, we're
first,
definitely happy.
Did I foreshadow too much?
A little bit too much, yeah.
Okay.
Because first off, when Tim had kind of alluded to it, are we talking about the writing? Or are we talking about the recording? That's one of the things that's really different about this particular album is they're happening really simultaneously.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They've written the main structure of several major songs.
Mm-hmm.
We've already talked about several of them. We didn't yet talk about Cabernesses, which is also great.
Mm-hmm.
But now the question of when you're recording this material, it's still, you're kind of in the writing process because how does it all come together? Because Brian has these little short fragments that are going to find themselves stitched together to create this whole piece.
But that's all coming later because it hasn't happened yet.
Well, but now we're in that process of recording, and obviously, the brain's ticking, and he's figuring out how are these things going to go together. It's all happening simultaneously.
Yeah.
But a lot of it is centered around one particular song that we haven't yet talked about. We've alluded to already a little bit, but very, very, very much of the SMiLE story here is connected to this one central piece, the centerpiece of the SMiLE project, and that is
Heroes and Villains.
Heroes and Villains.
Does that mean it's
not?
No.
Not yet. There will be time for that. And by the way, just to let everybody know, you already see it in the timer. This is going to be a little bit of a longer episode, so just
buckle up.
Yeah.
All right,
Deal with it.
Yeah, deal with it on this one. We kind of broke the tradition with our last one. So yeah, Heroes and Villains.
Yeah.
Compositionally, first off,
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
such a great melody.
Incredible.
That descending melody is a thing of beauty. That first line, then
It's so many words, but it works.
It always reminds me of a song that hadn't yet come out, but that first little line, really long line of "I Am the Walrus."
Oh yeah.
Where it just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes, and then it just sort of ends, and you're left thinking, all right, my head's still kind of spinning trying to put all that together.
Yeah.
But that was fucking awesome. And yeah, just the whole, it's just bam.
Right.
Here you go.
And then the song, it's similar to Good Vibrations in the sense that it has sections and movements and things like that. It shifts gears several times.
And yet, nobody knows really what is,
Right.
still to this day, there's been a quote-unquote canon version. There was eventually a single, and we're going to talk about that whole saga. But still to this day, people are still creating their own perfect versions of Heroes and Villains, because the question is is Heroes and Villains 3.5 minutes? Is it 6 minutes? Is it 11 minutes?
Right.
Is it an entire side of what's going to become SMiLE? What is and isn't part of it?
Because there's a lot of melodies that are repeated throughout.
Oh yeah.
That pop up in different maybe movements, as it were, and you hear these almost like you would have an aria come in and out of an operatic composition. There are a lot of themes that and motifs that come
motifs that repeat.
back and repeat throughout this. And so,
Yeah.
Well, and if you look, for instance, at the, we're not talking about the sessions yet, but if you look and listen to those, and you'll see labeled as part of Heroes and Villains stuff the Old Master Painter, Your Mindless Sunshine, what else? Great Shape and Barnyard were apparently maybe part of Heroes and Villains. Fragments of Do You Like Worms or Roll Plymouth Rock, as it's known. Even the first couple tracks are considered by some to be part of Heroes and Villains.
Yeah.
Nobody really exactly knows what was and wasn't, I suppose, part of this song, but it's all central to the SMiLE project.
And part of the craziness of it is there were 50 hours of tape. Can you wrap your head around that? There's 50 hours of studio recordings from a bunch of different studios of a bunch of different parts of a bunch of different fragments that it's a massive puzzle.
But you gotta have, you get the sense that there's a little bit of a savant thing happening with Brian.
Yeah, he had an idea.
I assume to take notes, but he's probably I know this takes Unreal 3 or whatever, but still.
You got a sense that he kind of knew what was going on. And that's part of the fascination about this is that if you go and listen to Heroes and Villains, whatever version it is, you could hear all of those little movements and motions. I think that's what's so fascinating about it is if you're stepping back and looking at the timeline, different people would have heard different snippets at different points of time, because before all of the sessions were released, years later, there were little pieces that would come out, or Brian might play a melody of Heroes and Villains at a party or something, and there's all kinds of little like teases of this that's been floating around, which is pretty fascinating.
Well, and bits and pieces of this whole project would be peppered throughout following albums. Like the next few albums, there's this song's from SMiLE, this song's from SMiLE. Right,
and so this is part of the tumultuous layer here, is that some of that paranoia, some of that mental health starts creeping in these recordings. And so there different Beach Boys have commented on the record over the years that this is one of the more painful times for them, because Brian was out there and demanding, and at times like not making a ton of sense, and having them like drain his pool and go record at the bottom while laying down.
That's actually later.
But some of that stuff
he was making them crawl around the studio making animal noises and stuff.
Isn't that happening?
There's a quote from Bruce where it just makes it sound like horrific, and he's sore about it still. I don't know.
Oh, I thought that was from Al.
I think that was from Bruce.
Okay. Yeah.
I hadn't heard that. What was that?
I don't know. It's a long quote.
It was the thing, about crawling around.
There was one from Al, but there was another one from Bruce that I saw. It was Bruce actually said something about making them lie down in the studio. But then Brian was like shouting orders at them and laughing and being really cruel.
Yeah, and at one point, like Van Dyke said something about like he ultimately stepped away because he couldn't handle Brian's buffoonery.
And
Mike's jealousy.
Yeah. Wait a minute. It sounds like it's time for an episode of Heroes and Villains.
What?
That's right. It's time for Heroes and Villains, where we discuss the heroes and the villains, whatever it is we happen to be talking about this week. And whoa, wait a minute. We are through the looking glass here, because we're literally talking about heroes and villains.
I'm confused.
While we have an episode of Heroes and Villains.
We're talking about the song or segment?
We don't know, really. Yeah. Okay, heroes and villains. First off, heroes. Brian, obviously, because he's the eternal hero.
Yeah.
Van Dyke Parks. Yeah, I always see Van Dyke as a hero. Like, I feel like he's kind of that guy who comes, and even though he and Brian have their back and forth a little bit, I think that's probably because of maybe Brian's illness has not been super kind to their relationship. But I feel like Van Dyke is a positive influence in Brian. He's encouraging him and pushing him.
He's kind of his rudder, I feel like.
Yeah.
Because there's when he leaves, part of what I read was that Brian kind of didn't know what to do. It seemed like Van Dyke was kind of keeping him on task, in addition to just writing lyrics and stuff. But he was helping with the arrangements and encouraging him, and then he was his partner, and then he was gone. Yeah. So that may have contributed to why it never actually got finished.
And Van Dyke Parks, let's not just say, oh, this guy's a lyricist. First off, he was a brilliant musician, a session musician, but also just a great arranger. Yeah. Like his album Song Cycle comes out in 1967. It's definitely idiosyncratic, but it's great. It's really, really good.
I've never listened to it all the way through, because it starts in such a weird way.
Yeah, it's an acquired taste for sure, but it's really, really good. Once you get it,
I gotta listen to it.
But he's totally
Van Dyke's hero.
And after Brian, he's the hero, I think, of the SMiLE sessions.
Okay. Yeah, for sure.
All right, time for the fucking villain. Yep.
I don't know. I mean, is there really a villain? Maybe mental illness. Maybe Desbutal.
It's fucking Mike Love.
It's Mike Love.
Good God. Really? Of all the transgressions of Mike Love, the one that is the worst, in my mind at least, as a fan of pop music, is Mike Love, more than anything else, even in Brian Wilson's own words,
crapping on SMiLE,
is what keeps this album from us.
Yeah. In the documentary, he specifically says, Brian says, and I wrote the whole thing down. I'll tell you from my heart, in 1967, the reasons I didn't finish SMiLE were Mike didn't like it, number one. That's just the first thing he says. And then he says that Brian himself thought it was too experimental, and he thought the fire tape was too scary, and that people wouldn't understand him. But the primary reason was Mike didn't like it.
Yeah.
Like that's, as far as I can tell, that's what took the wind out of his sails. Like none of the guys really understood it, but Mike was a little bit more aggressively like, what the hell is this?
Yeah.
We're going to lose our audience. This isn't commercial.
What does columnated ruined domino mean?
And the Crow cries, uncover the cornfields line. He also, he had Van Dyke Parks come in to explain it, and he didn't.
Yeah.
And part of the reason, Van Dyke left was because he didn't feel like he needed to explain his lyrics. And then you got this
jackass.
Yeah. And this is like weird jealousy and... Yeah, it became a negative atmosphere.
Right. Well, and totally. You could tell Mike Love, he's like, I did it with good vibrations. Why can't I write the music for it? I know how it
lyrics,
works.
yeah.
And
Why aren't there any songs about root beer on this album?
yeah.
I know how to fix it.
So frustrating. Yeah, definitely Mike's the villain. No question.
Eternal
villain.
Fucking villain. And in this episode, probably more than any other episode.
Yeah.
Because...
And because
as you
of
know,
this,
as we've already alluded, this album does not come out. We have something today called the SMiLE Session, sure, and it comes out in 2011. And yes, it is fucking glorious. It is amazing. But we do not have SMiLE in 1967.
No. We've got Brian Wilson presents SMiLE.
We eventually, we get Brian doing his own version. We'll talk about that. We'll have an episode about both of these things. But we do not end up with SMiLE in 1967. And the world of pop music suffers
and you
immensely as a result of that.
You get a sense that the Beach Boys progression momentum hits a zenith and just crashes.
Yeah.
And you get a sense that now, oh my gosh, we had so much momentum. We had Pet Sounds. Can you imagine if in 1967 you had if you had Rubber Soul, you had Pet Sounds, you had Revolver, you had SMiLE, Sergeant Pet, like the limitless possibilities of what could continue to come. But no, it comes crashing down.
The entire landscape of pop music would have been so different if that idea of modular recording had proven to be something that could reasonably be obtained with a fuck ton of effort, but reasonably obtained in 1966, 67. It's tragic that this album doesn't get to be finished because it was so damn close.
Yeah.
Everything
really
is recorded. Almost everything is recorded. There's some vocal parts that we don't have in their 1967 form, but it was so tantalizingly close.
Yeah.
And Mike fucking... and let's also not forget, Capitol Records deserves some villainry distinction here as well, too. They are continually pushing. We need an album. We need an album. We need an album.
This is Capitol, maybe Derek Taylor too, but they started marketing it.
They did
before it was even fully written. Before it was recorded, they're like, SMiLE's coming out. Everybody remember Good Vibrations? It's going to be more of that.
Yeah.
Just putting all these expectations on Brian, and we talked about him being sensitive to feedback. Like he was getting positive feedback until the boys come back from tour, and then suddenly it's like, oh shit, self-doubt.
And he shelves it.
Added with the
pressure.
and the expectations too. Like he's at that point, now that he knows that some people are gonna hear it and not like it, he's worried about his reputation and not living up to the expectations that everybody has. So it kind of drives him crazy.
Yep. And so he takes it. He shelves it. He's like, nope, we're not putting it out. Brian makes that call, even though
Now, right around the time that this is all happening, Heroes and Villains will come out.
Right. So you were saying it's so tantalizingly close. We have Heroes and Villains actually kind of gets pieced and is released.
Does that come out before?
It does.
Does it come out before SMiLE SMiLE?
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's hard to really kind of, is this really truly Heroes and Villains?
Right.
I mean, there were mock-ups. You hear these stories about how apparently, versions that were 6 minutes had been played to some people in the know. There's an alternate version out there that includes the famous Cantina section that was circulating. It was never released, but it was a mix that had been done at that point in 1967. What comes out is a 3.5 minute version of the song.
Oh, okay.
and it's, released as a single. I think it was officially the first release by Brother Records.
Yeah.
It's distributed by Capitol. But even in that truncated form, it's still amazing.
It is, but it still fell on its face compared to Good Vibrations.
It did.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which was another indication maybe to Brian that people weren't ready or they weren't going to like it as much.
I mean, fell on its face is a little bit, I would say maybe of a little bit of a misnomer. Like there's all this story about, it only did this. It got to number 12. Right. I mean, it was still a hit.
I thought it was 40. Maybe I'm thinking of SMiLE. It was like 41.
SMiLE. Yeah. But
okay,
it was like, I was just out of curiosity because I don't have the 45, other than the one that comes with the SMiLE Sessions box set. So I was like looking it up. And you can find copies of the 45 of it for like $8 or $10.
Okay.
Like with the actual picture sleeve and everything. So it had to have sold well.
Yeah.
And it reached number 12. Okay. So it wasn't like a flop. It was just,
not
where do you go after Good Vibrations?
Right.
Pretty much only you go down. Whether it's, artistically set that aside. But commercially, where do you go after Good Vibrations? Right. It's almost certainly going to be down.
Yeah.
Now, it's also at this point, the Beatles have released a little single of their own, which...
It's pretty good.
Yeah. It's all right,
It's pretty good.
If we could. Hold on a minute. Yeah, I just did it. I'm giving a Brian to the Beatles single that comes out.
Yep.
Strawberry Fields Forever.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. As the B-side.
Well, as they were co-A-side. It was a double A-side. Strawberry Fields
up.
Forever, Penny Lane.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah, that's a perfect.
Definitely, like Strawberry Fields, definitely the most advanced thing the Beatles had done to that point. Yeah.
So Brian feels that he's been beaten in this race. And
there was that scene. I don't remember if they talk about this in the documentary if or not, but he says he was in the car, he was on downers, he had to pull over when he first heard that song because it was so, it blew his mind. And then he told the guy he was in the car with that, they beat me. What's the point in finishing this anymore? But then they laughed about it. They kind of laughed it off.
Yeah.
I don't remember if he mentions that in the doc, but like he said that, but I don't think that really necessarily took the wind out of his sails, as much as the Mike thing did.
Yeah.
Well, and then on top of all of that, a building burns down. Have we talked about this?
Well, yeah.
We haven't. Yeah.
So like, while all of this is happening, he's getting pumped up, but also deflated, and like there's this roller coaster of emotions, tumultuous.
Right.
And on top of all of that, there's this paranoia going on. Like at some point, he's thinking like Phil Spector's bugging his studio sessions.
Pretty bad.
And he's
he goes full Kanye at one point.
Yeah. It gets
not full Kanye.
Well, no.
So like they go into one session and they're doing what was it always called?
The phrase "Death Con," which is
correctly,
but 3 is never utilized by Brian
He does
Wilson.
Apparently at one point think that he's the target of a quote Jewish conspiracy involving Phil Spector.
Yeah,
but he says that to David Anderle, who is Jewish, and he was shocked and like stopped speaking to Brian for a time before he eventually forgave him. So I like to think that Brian having such a close, inner circle person actually being Jewish and him saying, something terrible like that, or Brian saying something terrible. I would like to think that kind of woke him up like, oh, wait, no, that's bullshit.
I'm crazy.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of stuff going on, and like even just like as he gets there, and there's footage you can see of them recording these sessions.
So yeah, the elements fire.
Right.
It really kind of like we're talking about the mental decline. It really personifies that, or you can hear it in the music and you see it in the photos. He's not wearing a shirt. Yeah. And he's wearing the fire helmet.
Yeah.
He brings a bucket of wood into the studio, sets it on fire so it would smell like smoke. He's kind of falling off the rails.
But it's also out there. Like he's thinking about, this idea of elements, and he's got this health food and this humor album. And it's almost like SMiLE
he wants to do,
is a conglomeration of all of these albums together.
Several ideas going on at the same time.
Maybe it's like it's the impetus of this and he's setting us up for something to come. Like this is like a teaser or maybe a prologue to like the next 3 albums that the Beach Boys could put out.
I mean, fire was supposed to be part of a larger suite. It was air, water,
right,
earth,
and so like that's some of the stuff we were talking about. The villainy of Mike is that it kind of craps on what could have been, and so and then of course, at the same time, Brian's like freaking out.
Right.
They do this whole fire recording session.
And according to him,
fire hats and
building
stuff.
down the street burns down on the same day.
On the same day.
And he thinks he caused it, sort of.
He thinks, he feels guilty that he caused it. And so he's all paranoid. And so he like wants to shelve everything. And so that's essentially right.
Yeah, I mean, and I believe Heroes and Villains as a single comes out right around the time that the shelving had occurred.
Well, it's funny because Derek Taylor says in the press that in late April 29th, he says, all the tracks are recorded. This thing's ready to come out any minute. And then
a week later.
Yeah, May 6th, he says, oh, it's been scrapped. But that was not necessarily the official announcement. Because there's speculation that Brian hadn't even made that decision yet. But the final recording session was May 18th.
Okay. And Heroes and Villains actually doesn't even come out till July 31st.
Okay.
Which I need to check. I think this might even be more or less the same version, right? That's on the next album.
I think it is, yeah.
But again, it represents sort of a end, really, to the project as a whole. There's an anecdote by Bruce Johnston, of all people, where he's talking about how he was in a club in London, I think, and he had been there when they premiered the new single "Heroes and Villains" on the dance floor. Yeah, did you see this one?
No.
And he's like, yeah, everybody gets up and they're dancing, and then it goes into the slow Heroes and Villains part, and everybody stopped dancing, and he knew right then that the single was gonna tank. And it's like, well, I mean, okay, maybe I can see what you're saying, but nobody's out there, dancing to Strawberry Fields Forever and Penny Lane.
Good Vibrations has the little breakdown part too.
Yeah,
so,
but then again, it's Bruce Johnston. Like, what value does he have?
It's a very large head.
Middling.
It makes his voice resonate in a certain way.
Very large head. Yeah.
I say that as a big-headed person.
Yeah. All right. Well, I want to take another quick break and come back and talk a little bit about essentially what happens in the interim between the failure of SMiLE and the eventual release of the SMiLE sessions.
Right.
Yeah. So we'll be right back. Back for a quick little segment talking about sort of what happens in all of the intervening years. So we've talked about already that SMiLE, the project collapses in 1967, late spring, early summer.
But like super publicly collapses because it's everybody picks up whatever new music magazine and like that's what people want to find out. Is it ready yet? Is it ready? And it never comes to fruition.
They have these contractual obligations too that keep coming up. At one point, they get fined like $50,000 by Capitol because it didn't come out like 2 years later or whatever.
Yeah. So this is where some of the mystique of all of this happens is that somehow there have been leaks of these recordings get out.
Well, sure. So what I was saying before you so rudely interrupted me, Glenn,
sorry, is
we don't get like an official release of anything SMiLE until Brian Wilson's reconstruction of it in 2004. Then in 2011, we have the SMiLE Sessions box set. We're going to have an episode about both of those things.
Yeah.
But in that interim period, even between that, some things will trickle out. Some things will actually trickle out officially, too. So, for instance, several of these songs will find their way onto actual Beach Boys albums.
Right.
Our Prayer, Cabin Essence, Surf's Up,
Mama Says is based on one of the songs.
Yeah. Vegetables, Wind Chimes, and Wonderful.
Right.
So pieces of SMiLE make their way out there. Not the actual recordings from 1966 and 67, but those songs find their way out. And most of really the major songs of SMiLE do find their way out to the public. Mm-hmm. So people become aware that the material is great. Those are oftentimes usually like the highlights of those respective albums. Even when a SMiLE song's on there, it's probably the best thing that's going to be on there. And usually they were happening like in lieu of Brian offering up new material. It's like, all right, well, here's the Brian Wilson.
And he was resistant to even re-recording.
Typically, yeah.
Well, and that's the problem is Brian now has been crushed. He's been deflated.
Bad associations.
And so like we start to get Brian's off into seclusion. And
I would say that a lot of that happens a little later. We're going to talk about a sort of intervening era.
But it's
still,
also but I think the mentality of Brian kind of being defeated, it's like, here, just take some of this and throw this out there, and it's not really the way it was meant to be. And so I feel like there was almost like some money grubbers, like, we got to piece something together. Let's take some of Brian's gems from the SMiLE, and maybe that'll make something palatable for the record label.
Yeah, but I do think that there is a misconception about what SMiLE does in the larger story of Brian Wilson's biography. I think there's a perception that a lot of people have, and I think it's even kind of supported by this documentary that we've talked about that we all like, that SMiLE fails and then Brian spends the next decade in bed. His real true seclusion doesn't really happen for a few more years. Okay. We're going to talk about the post-SMiLE trilogy, as I call it, of albums, Smiley Smile, Wild Honey, and Friends. Brian is very involved with all three of those records. Mm-hmm. So he's not like a total recluse at this point. He's engaged. It's just things are different. And we're going to talk about that next week when we discuss Smiley Smile specifically. But yeah, he doesn't, it's not SMiLE fails. Now Brian is ruined as a person. He's certainly dealing with some shit.
Right.
Yeah.
But his seclusion doesn't happen yet at this point. And I think that's it's a misconception that I had, I think, at one point. And I think it's sort of perpetuated by the way in which SMiLE is sort of portrayed as the thing that broke Brian.
Mm. But here's the other interesting, like, fascinating piece, is because there are these like trail breadcrumbs out there, it's allowed for like super crazies like us to like latch on and like play little, fantasy football with these little snippets and like, what if we piece together, here's how I would have done it. And so you have all of these novice just fans playing record producer thinking like, oh, here's how SMiLE really should have come out. And so you have all these little fan collections or bootlegs using these different pieces from various albums, like, here's how I might have done it, or this is what I would have, how I would have sequenced it.
So these things trickle out in forms both legitimate and illegitimate. There's a lot of bootlegs that start to find their way out there of actual SMiLE tapes in the 70s. Cassette trading in the 80s really kind of perpetuates a lot of this stuff. Officially, some of it did get released in 1993. I think there's a CD box set, Good Vibrations, and I want to say it's like the last disc of that had several of the original SMiLE recordings in it. And yeah, as Glenn says, a lot of people just go to take it upon themselves to start piecing together their own versions of SMiLE.
Did you do it?
I did, yeah. I did it quite a bit later, though. I was not around in the 70s, and was too young to be trading tapes via mail with weirdos in the 1980s. So I actually really didn't become super aware of SMiLE until, after, of course, I'd, gotten into the Beatles or Beach Boys via Pet Sounds. So it was probably around 2002, 2003 where I sort of became aware of like, oh, there's this lost Beach Boys album. I was actually under the impression that the tapes had been destroyed. That's been sort of referenced in some places. I don't think it's the documentary that we watched, but I want to say it's one of the other, or not documentary, the made-for-TV film.
Right.
But I want to say it's like one of the other ones. There's like the evil one that's even worse, in which I think they actually show him. He might just be like burning the album covers of it or whatever. Okay. But there was this myth that was out there that Brian destroyed all of the session tapes from SMiLE and all of that.
There was something about I forget what song it was, some master tape missing. so for the stereo mix that came later, they had to use some crazy computer technology to like extract the individual parts.
Probably
and stuff.
similar to what the Beatles did recently. With
Okay, yeah.
Thing,
but
yeah.
I don't. It wasn't like all of SMiLE, but it was like one particular song.
Yeah,
I think I forget which one.
So yeah, I did make my own version after the Brian Wilson Presents SMiLE thing came out. I basically tried to recreate my own. Using GarageBand, my own version of that, nice. Just using as much of the original session tapes as possible.
Yeah.
So it was fun. Eventually, I found what was for several years kind of considered the gold standard of these. It was the Purple Chick bootleg, which did a really good job of recreating the. As we call it, BWPS, Brian Wilson Presents SMiLE, using session tapes. It did a better job than I did with mine, so I just started listening to that one a whole lot. And then obviously,
available? Is it out there? Can you?
It's probably still out there on YouTube and such. But yeah, then in 2011, and again, we're gonna have an episode about this. But the Beach Boys say, "All right, well, we'll make our own version of it. We'll do what all the bootleggers and traders have been doing for years. We'll just make our own mix of the SMiLE album." Right. And they put that together in the SMiLE sessions, and we'll talk about that in time. Mm-hmm. But that, like releasing that whole box set. In some ways, I kind of thought, oh, well, this means it's just going to be sort of the end of the whole tape trading. We're going to make our own version of SMiLE because now the Beach Boys did their official canon version of it. Right. But apparently, like in just doing the research for this, it's just like escalated because there's all of that session material out there. So people have been, getting really creative with making their own versions of it. And I listened to a few this week. They're fun.
It's kind of fun too. Like I went down a rabbit hole with that with Smiley Smile. We'll talk about that next week. But there's similar things that you can do with that.
There's some really good ones out there. There are some where I'll like it for a while, and then they start using a whole bunch of different tricks and techniques, and using like weird kind of shitty reverbs on it instead, and. It's like, all right, well, you had a good idea there. What I found interesting are several different like fan mixes that they've made of like, here's what I think heroes and villains would be like perfected. Mm-hmm. Not like I'm going to try to make the whole SMiLE album, but I'm just going to hone in on what could heroes and villains have been if it had come out in that like 11-minute version or 6-minute version or what have you. And those are kind of interesting to listen to.
I haven't heard any of this nerd shit. And that's okay.
Well, one thing that I think is kind of, I don't know, maybe this is just the dumb way in which I think about stuff, but the whole notion of Brian Wilson creating SMiLE in the sandbox, right?
Yeah.
And that it's become like this sandbox. So you talk about like a sandbox video game where you open world, you can go do whatever you want. And like, that's what fans are doing with it. They're just like playing in the sandbox and making their own versions of SMiLE and heroes and villains. And maybe in the end, now that we have all of that, now that, what happened, maybe that's the legacy this album was supposed to have.
Seriously.
Maybe the best thing is that it is still the great lost album of pop music history.
And that, I mean, look at...
And maybe Mike Love's really a hero. No, fuck that.
No. But dude, look at how the music... today, like, it's so accessible now. We can all be in a sandbox. Like, you could go and like, open up GarageBand and do your own kind of tweaking. I mean, shoot.
Is Al Jardine going to come in and shit in my copy of your GarageBand?
We may or may not have dabbled in modular writing ourselves.
Yeah, that's sort of the elephant in the room here. All of these little pieces of our royalty-free to us music that you're hearing is
us messing around,
us making modular music and making an album.
It's a freaking blast.
It was fun.
Yeah. It's fun. Yeah. So thank you, Brian. We appreciate you.
Yeah. Thank you, Sand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just an album that has its own special legacy in the history of pop music. I guess maybe the tragedy is that people who really, really wanted SMiLE in real time in 1967, they never got, perhaps a lot of them, the finished version because they weren't around in 2004 when Brian actually released it and when the real sessions came out and all that. But it's a special... You can't even call it an album, but it's a special project in the history of popular music, and maybe it, as special as it is, it deserves its own unique legacy, I suppose.
Yeah,
sure.
And I mean, if we're rating these songs, just like here's what Brian made in 1966 and 67, however SMiLE would have been put together, let's be honest here. It is.
Brian Wilson.
It's a fucking Brian.
Brian. Yeah.
God,
they're rating it.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah.
Well, I mean, we don't have to because it doesn't come out.
Right,
but
right,
whatever incarnation it would have come out as, just look at that.
Oh, so good.
Look at those 8 or 10 major songs that are there, and you've got
even just
something.
The aura, the spirit of it. Yeah.
You've got something that
magical.
This might be blasphemy, but that probably would have been about as good as Pet Sounds. It's just special music.
Mm-hmm. It is special.
You know what else is a Brian and a low is the size of my bladder right now.
Yeah.
All right.
This episode's officially too long.
Okay. Well, let's take one more quick break, and we'll be right back to wrap it all up.
Yay.
We've already seeded that people have
what are you doing?
shut off the podcast.
Oh, yeah.
They aren't listening
doesn't matter.
anyway, so this doesn't matter.
No, it does still matter. So thanks for listening again this week. We hope you enjoyed our revisitation of the SMiLE project. We will, like we said, be back, and then we'll talk about BWPS.
Yeah, BWPS.
And the SMiLE sessions. And we'll be talking about those SMiLE tracks as we reach the other albums that are coming up, because there's lots of them out there. And yeah, you know what to do.
Smash
like
the
said, smash the like, subscribe, share with your friends.
Talking Beach Boys.
Tell people about this.
Tell your grandma.
You tell your grandma. It's clean-ish. Okay, maybe not. I don't think
TV
my grandma
14.
listens to it.
TV 14.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, thanks for joining us again this week, and we will be back next week to talk about
Smiley smile.
Hey.
Later.
I'm going to take a Sloop John P.
Yay.